Hi, I'm Megan Story, and this will be my presentation for EDL 854 Building Finance for our case study. So section one, we are summarizing the case. So Mr. Carlos Santos, he is going to be the principal at Briardale Elementary School. And so at Briardale, it's a small community that's going to serve as, the Briardale serves as the community center, the elementary school. And so it can hold more than 1,000 people in that one elementary school. It is one of 6 elementary schools. This is a successful district in keeping teachers for longevity. The district is going to focus on basic skills within education, but then anything that is supplemental comes from outside fundraising, which is brought to you by a foundation for fundraising at each school's site. And a parent is the chair of that for each site, called the foundation president. The foundation president at Briardale is going to be a new parent. His name is Mr. Barely, and he is going to be the reason to motivate money for the foundation. He really wants to go above and beyond of what has normally been done for supplemental programs to add extension to things. So basically, he feels that he is more into a competition with Mr. Morley, who is another foundation president at another elementary school that he was formerly a fraternity brother with. And so with that, Mr. Bravely has the idea from his fraternity days of doing a raffle for cash. Mr. Santos and the committee agree upon it and think it's a good idea. So they'll exchange raffle tickets for cash. And the night of the fundraiser, after the tickets have been sold, they are getting ready to do their first fundraiser. And a tipster calls into the local sheriff's office that gives a tip about Mr. Barely. And basically, they take him, they book him, and they release him. He is given a misdemeanor, and then he is placed on probation from his role. And so Mr. Santos and the school district are embarrassed. Section 2 is report any legal or ethical issues, and so there are some legal and ethical issues to this problem. So the school district in Briardale Elementary were harmed in the decision making. Ultimately, it affects the students and the stakeholders, and so money is obviously a legal issue. And so Mr. Santos should have checked with Mr. Barley's background to note that he had any money issues prior to assigning him to be the foundation president. They also need to check on the state revenue and be aware of the policies and procedures from the state. While I do not feel that Mr. Santos did anything ethically wrong, he really was naive in his judgment on the parent that he assigned to be the foundation president, Mr. Barely. And so with Mr. Barely's misdemeanor, he should ultimately be terminated from the foundation as president, and I think Mr. Santos learned a valuable lesson. But back to what I was talking about with the state revenue is that in the state of Kansas, if said money is over $25,000 that has been fundraised, it must have applied for a raffle license. And Mr. Barely really felt like they could raise that much. So ultimately, he should have probably had the license in hand. It's like $25. It's not that expensive. A raffle is defined as the proposed amendment to a mean of a game or a chance and a participant when they buy tickets to win something. And so basically this is through a nonprofit organization, and they have to have this license or they cannot participate. One big thing that I noticed in this when reading about the legal issues of this is that the licensed nonprofit organization shall not participate. So no one included, Mr. Santos, Mr. Barely, nobody should be included participating in that as a player in the raffle. Synthesize for Section 3. Briardale Elementary is going to host a raffle ticket fundraiser for cash that was approved by Mr. Santos, the school president, the school president who let the Briar Elementary Foundation president, Mr. Barely. A new parent facilitates said fundraiser, ultimately concluding while Mr. Barely was arrested for misconduct, booked, released, and given a misdemeanor. Section 4, synthesize the facts. So the people that are involved are Mr. Santos, the president, Mr. Barely, or the principal, Mr. Barely, the foundation president, Mr. Morley, who is another foundation president at another one of the 6 elementary schools, the Briardale Elementary Foundation, members of the community, and then the sheriff's office that was involved. This place was at the Briardell Elementary, where 600 students attend that school. 500 to 800 students are enrolled at each of the other 6 elementary schools. They have 2 middle schools, 1 high school. The programs that are at Briardell are their foundation, which is where their supplemental curriculum will come from, and then their Briardell Foundation fundraiser at their elementary school. Section 5 is to review and prioritize information. So conflict is damaging to leadership. Mr. Santos was naive in his situation that he allowed this to occur. The conflict basically has the potential to be damaging to stakeholders in the community due to Briardell Elementary not raising money for supplemental programs that currently have or intend to have. So ultimately, the fundraiser was a wash. There is enough information to make a formative decision moving forward, which I will show you on the next slide. But input would be needed from the superintendent, Mr. Santos, the foundation committee, and likely a legal team due to the law enforcement being involved. Checking all information to make sure that all legal documentation is up to date when dealing with Mr. Riley's case and the school involvement. Financial secretaries that are appointed, as well as school officials, should probably review the findings due to both Mr. Santos and Mr. Riley dealing with the money. 6, identify your options and consequences. So first consideration, take no action. Mr. Santos has no repercussions. Mr. Riley, he's going to continue as foundation president. Option 2 is Mr. Santos is reprimanded for his negligence in background checking of Mr. Riley. Mr. Riley is Riley is dismissed from being the foundation president. The school district takes legal action against Mr. Riley in his premedicated intentions. Establish policies and procedures for approval of fundraisers from now on. Create guidelines for future foundation presidents to follow. Work with the foundation to make sure that all members are adhering to those guidelines. So there's essentially like a checks and balances. Everybody's holding each other accountable. The third consideration is for the superintendent and the board to take legal action against Mr. Barely. And then all 6 elementary schools have the same policies and procedures for equality and equity, basically. So just to make sure that everybody's on the same page. Section 7, evaluate your options. So first, consider take no action. So Mr. Santos has no repercussion. So with this one, there are no pros. Really, it's just kind of everybody stays the same. Cons could be legal ramifications if nothing is done. With my second consideration, pros would be guidance, which provides the school district with the opportunity to have successful fundraisers. And basically the cons would be the school districts could look bad, like untrustworthy with the stakeholders. Mr. Santos, he may be resentful, and then a lack of trust among stakeholders if it's not handled properly. Third consideration, so when we talk about this, our pros or fairness throughout all elementary schools is key. There was talk of there being trying to outwin each other so that there was more supplemental recommendations. But a con of this is the lack of trust among staff if handled poorly, because that can create tension among the different schools. Large changes being made can be stressful on environments also. So Section 8, choose the best option. The option that I chose would be to take the option 2. So the best decision is for basically for the principal to make is to include the superintendent and the school's legal team on the situation that took place. The principal needs to take responsibility for not following through on the background of Mr. Barely. Also needs to have a plan of action along with this to allow fundraisers to be successful in his building and throughout the district. Mr. Barely should be terminated from his position of foundation president, and the district should see through that there were no mishandlings of money. A committee of stakeholders should compile policies, procedures, and guidelines that would allow for all 6 elementaries to have that equity for fundraising the quality that's there. Through this practice, there is evaluation, development, and advocating for data-informed and equitable resourcing plan that supports school improvement and student development for long-term fundraising and supplemental curriculum. So basically, a long-term solution is to have a fund that is allocated to develop a multi-year resourcing plan aligned to school goals and priorities for future support of needs. Section 9 is going to be your image implementing your decisions. So If I'm implementing my decision, I'm going to speak with the superintendent and the legal team to make sure that all my bases are covered with the legal side. Have stakeholders in the committee meeting about changes that will occur so that all stakeholders that are involved within this have a comprehension of what is going to happen in order to undertake and implement the work within the school setting. Follow up with Mr. Santos, the principal, on how to handle conflicting scheduling conflicts in the future. So if this occurs again, what can we do? Work through professional learning and or development within the school setting to allow the opportunity for all stakeholders to meet district policy through instructional expectations of guidelines, procedures, norms, values of fundraising so that everyone is aware. That is it for my presentation for EDL 854. Thank you.